Welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. Are you in a healthy, successful marriage, or are you stuck in a lifeless marriage? Only you know the real truth. Regardless of your answer, help is on the way. Our next guest reminds us of something we know, but often ignore, and that is most people don't really change unless someone takes the initiative to bring the change into the relationship. You can turn unhealthy to healthy and healthy to exceptional, and all it takes is learning to play nice in the sandbox and learn how to enjoy peaceful relationships with the most important people in your life. Ron Price owns and operates Productive Outcomes, Inc. He offers a variety of services, including dispute resolution, relationship coaching, public speaking, and workplace training. He's also the executive director of the Four Corners Coalition for Marriage and Family, a 501c3 organization he co-founded in 2004. Ron has a bachelor's in sociology from the University of Rhode Island and a master's in counseling from the University of New Mexico. He writes a weekly column for the Farmingdale, New Mexico Daily Times. Here to discuss his new book, Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Home, is Ron Price. Ron, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Rabbi Eric. It's a pleasure to be with you folks.
Well, it's great to be with you. Before we get into the book, I want to kind of get into a little bit of your backstory and even include part of your faith journey and what made you want to go into mediation, conflict resolution. Was it because of conflict in your life early on, or was it because you saw the conflicts in others and you wanted something better and for people to enjoy what you had? So let's take a journey back into your upbringing and see what life was like in the little Ron Price home.
I'll be happy to do that, but didn't you tell me we only had a 1-hour program?
Okay, I'm sorry.
I started life, that was a bad joke. I started life in Rhode Island into a Jewish family. So you and I are kindred.
Yes.
Mom passed on at an early age. Eric, when I was 6, we found out she had cancer, and this is way back in the 50s before they could barely spell the word. And she fought a 2-year battle, but then lost. And I had my older brother, my younger sister, and Dad did a good job holding us together. It was hard, but he did a good job. Went to school, went to Hebrew school after regular school a couple of times a week until I was bar mitzvahed at 13. And I remember the day Dad came to me and said, "Ron, you're a man now." I said, "Well, that's pretty cool, Dad." He said, "Well, you have some decisions to make." I said, "Oh, really? Like what?" He said, "Well, do you want to keep going to Hebrew school?" I said, "Is it really my choice?" He said, "Yes." I said, "No." It just didn't mean anything to me. It was all foreign, and I had no connection with God. It just seemed like a system of rules and regulations. So I kind of turned away from faith. I turned away from God, got into some things that we don't need to talk about on the air, but around 25, I had graduated college. I went to the University of Rhode Island, and my kid's sister was enrolling at the University of Rhode Island, and I had never been in the same school as my sister. I decided it was time for me to move. So I got a couple of friends. We packed up, moved to Ruidoso, New Mexico, of all places. There was a ski area there. Some friends had worked out the year before, told me about it, so I headed out west, and I've never gone back. I now live in Farmington, New Mexico. It's in the Four Corners area. And I just kind of dabbled at different things. Oh boy, where do I go next in the story? Eric, when I was in Ruidoso, a friend of mine started witnessing to me. And it was the strangest experience, Rabbi, because I knew I didn't bring up the subject, but I couldn't remember him bringing it up either. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
But I heard an inner voice that said, "Wow, look how curious you are." And so he did. He didn't teach me religion or church or anything of the sort. He led me to Christ, and I've never looked back. That was back in 1979, and been on a faith journey ever since.
You know, New Mexico is the birthplace of a great deal of Messianic rabbis who are now in Israel.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Many of them gathered together in New Mexico, and were living the hippie life and kind of all living together, and found one among them that was a believer, and many of the pioneers of Messianic Judaism in Israel all started out in caves and camping in New Mexico, and so that almost became the epicenter of a breakout in the 70s of names like Eitan Shishkoff and some others who are really the founding fathers of the faith in Israel, and have grown on to become leaders and organizations, the Fellowship of Israel-Related Ministries, and really are the voice of the gospel among the Jewish population in Israel. So that all began in New Mexico as well. So there's something about New Mexico, aside from the experiences of the 60s, if you will, the experimentation of the 60s and 70s. There was the Jesus movement, and that made it there and impacted many Jewish lives. So what did you see that changed in you that made it where what was more rules and regulations to more of a transformational journey into following in the path of the Prince of Peace? And mediation is trying to bring reconciliation, trying to bring peace to a troubled situation. You have opposing parties. And this ministry of reconciliation that Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians 5:17 through 6:10, he talks about the fact that as a new creation, we're called into a ministry of reconciliation. And you've made your career in reconciliation, in mediation. That's another name for reconciliation, finding common areas to come to agreement on, to give and to take, and to establish that rapport. Did you see the parallels? Did you make that connection, or is that connection really coming clear to you now in this conversation?
Yes to the latter, for sure. And it won't surprise you that one of my favorite verses is Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God.
Yes.
But Eric, there is an interesting story, and this goes back to finishing your first question, if I may. Again, my life took a series of turns, got married and divorced. Actually, that was before I made my decision for Christ. But I moved to Farmington, New Mexico, and became a probation parole officer. And kind of knew the Lord, but not great yet. But I was content. I was content. And one day I was looking at the want ads. You're going to have to ask God why, because I don't know. But I do believe it was his prompting. I was gainfully employed, happy, contented. But I looked at the want ads one day, and I saw an ad that said the courts were starting a brand new program on divorce mediation. If parents are deciding they can't be together as husband and wife anymore, they can end the marriage, but they can't end the parenting, or at least they shouldn't. And so this program was designed to help parents come together and figure out how they wanted to raise the children separately, but in a spirit of togetherness. Rather than a judge rulings, mediation was designed to help the parents do that. And Eric, you'll understand this. I was drawn to it. I had to find out more. And so I called, and they had an organizational meeting. There were 27 people in the room, all trying to figure out what this was all about. And so they said, well, there's way too many of us here, so here's the deal. You got to get licensed. You got to take a 40-hour basic course in mediation training. You got to and this and this. Well, that whittled the number down to 8. 2 PhDs, 5 masters, and me with my BA. But I was in. I felt that calling in my life. So I went and took the 40-hour basic training. And a couple of years later, I decided, you know what, maybe I do need a master's. So I started commuting to Albuquerque 2 days a week. It's about a 3-hour drive away, not too bad. So I got my master's. And again, I mediated for the courts, divorce mediation, for 87 until 2016, probably 2017. And I often tell people I spend a lot of my life putting myself between people who are at odds with each other. And if that doesn't tell you I'm a sick man, I don't know what will. But Rabbi, it's always been a great blessing. And I still do some mediation on the side, but it's a great blessing to watch people come into my office at odds with each other, bitter, hostile, and leave not necessarily best buds, but at least the dispute has been put in its place. They can coexist and do whatever they need to do, again, separately, but in a spirit of togetherness.
Did you find that although you may not have been able to verbalize it in scriptural terms, that there were some foundational biblical truths that you had as an underlying factor that you employed in almost in disguise within your mediation methodology that you found equipped you to get to a little bit deeper core issues, a little bit deeper faith issues, a little bit deeper personal issues that made it so that you were the peacemaker and you took on that role and the identity through Messiah in this mediation that you did?
Yeah. Were you a fly on the wall, Rabbi Eric? I got in so much trouble. I shouldn't say so much trouble, but I got chastised from time to time because I took on the reputation as the mediator who tried to help the couples reconcile their marriage more than mediate their divorce. Now, that's not totally true. I was there to do my purpose, to serve my role in helping them have as peaceful a divorce as possible if in fact that's what they wanted to do. But Rabbi, I came across many couples who I just knew they're getting divorced for what I would consider foolish reasons, if I may. And I would offer them the opportunity. I would just, like you said, subtly plant seeds that, is this really going to make you happier? Is this really what you want to do? And if they were Christian, you bet I would be praying with them and bringing in scripture and those things. But again, working under the auspices of the court, unfortunately, I had to be somewhat limited.
Right, of course.
But yeah, I could probably count a dozen couples over the years that decided maybe divorce isn't. Once I showed them that they could work together separately, hey, maybe we can figure out how to work togetherly. Is that a word?
Well, it is a word now. If it's been used on the air into over 100 countries, then we've just incorporated it into the lexicon of mediation. As you began to transition from the corporate role of mediator into a ministerial role of mediator and one who took his voice of experience with the realities of divorce mediation and wanting to make a contribution to help people who are trying to navigate the trials and tribulations of any close relationship. And you know, the analogy that I always give is that when you take a piece of wood and you want to convert it into a beautiful piece of furniture, there's going to be a lot of contact, and that contact could be appear and feel to be quite painful. You may take a planer, and strip away some high places. And after it's been planed to a certain level, then you get to the sandpaper. And the sandpaper has to have full contact with every part of it. You have to continue to go back and forth. Well, if you think about friction, friction causes heat. And when you continue, there's heat involved in this friction that takes place. But if you do it long enough, then the piece of wood becomes incredibly smooth. It brings out the oils and the luster in it. And over time, what happens, the sandpaper is no longer rough. It's become a polishing cloth. And the piece of wood is no longer something that's rough-hewn, but it's now bright enough and polished enough that you might even be able to see a little bit of reflection of light in it, where once it was just a dull, dry piece of wood. This is kind of analogous to our relationship with God, is that when we first come into contact with God and He hits that high place, it hurts. And we tend to want to pull away. but the drive to stay closer and to move in closer and to embrace that refinement is something that we all have to do in order to be polished, transformed, refined, sifted, pressed down, all the things that are involved in that. Do you find that in the marital relationships that you counsel, that there is a closeness, but then they hit a difficult point and they tend to do exactly that? They hit that rough spot and they immediately pull back from it because it's painful, and rather than embrace maybe the conflict, but embrace why it hurts as opposed to the fact that it hurts, and to do the deeper examination as to the why. What is it about that bothered me? What is it? The same way a doctor probes for what your pain. First he tries to identify where the pain is, then he proceeds to identify what's causing the pain. Do you find that to be the case in the relationships, that the ones that are more successful, when they pull away, they use that time for examination as to why, but they still come back, and that closeness is something that now that the bump in it, the imperfection is now been shaved down, and they can actually become closer because that's no longer interfering with their closeness.
Yeah, that's so spot on, Rabbi. Let me tell your viewers what the number one problem in marriage is, if I may. With the number one mistake that everyone made when they got married. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
They married a human being. And yes, I'm being silly about it. Imperfect people come together in a close relationship, and then they expect that everything is going to be bliss and roses and joy and peace and harmony. That's just not possible. Imperfect people cannot carve out a perfect relationship. There are going to be, I think you used the word, bumps and bruises in any relationship that you spend meaningful time with another imperfect, fallible human being. And Eric, you're also right that we have our comfort zones and our safe areas, and we don't like it when people force us out of our comfort zones. We might be willing to take a step out when we're feeling confident and brave and what have you, but if somebody forces us out, that's a different story. But again, you're spot on. Couples that will, and one of the things I recommend in my book is take one evening a week, or at least two a month, for an issues night. Another night each week should be for fun, but take one evening a week where you're going to talk about issues. What's not going the way we'd like it in our relationship? Is it our parenting? Is it financial? Is it sexual? Is it communication? Is it whatever? But let's take these on. Let's schedule a time where we're going to talk using the love talk that I teach and communicate about these things. And if couples will do that, they can have the relationship they've dreamed of from youth and hoped for when they said, I do.
Ron, you use the analogy of a sandbox. I've tried to use this analogy before in marital counseling, and most of them told me it was more like a litter box than it was a sandbox. And that's kind of the way they alluded to what their marriage had become like. They understood the concept of admonishing your child to play nice in the sandbox with other kids, but they looked at it like it was a litter box, and all they were doing was covering up and burying the problems, as opposed to making it an area that was playful. So in using this analogy of a sandbox, where did that come from? And you actually use it you continue in your series because you have placed it, play nice in the sandbox at work and play nice in the sandbox. It's kind of a theme of a series of books that you've written to give people tools to play nice in various scenarios. But why the sandbox?
And by the way, let me do a shameless plug real quick. Hopefully, I'm going to be back on your program with book number 3. Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Church
Very
is
good.
due out November 10th. What a stupid title that is. Do you really need a book telling Christians they ought to get along with each other and how to do it? I thought the Bible already did that. But to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know where the sandbox came from. It just came to me. So I'm going to have to attribute that to God. Coincidence, is God's way of remaining anonymous. So he must have planted that seed in me. But Rabbi, one thing I definitely do remember, I was outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I was taking a weekend course in public speaking. And I was supposed to present the next day, and I wanted to present on at that time, my only book was Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Work. And so I'm sitting outside in the motel. I can picture the chair. I can picture the whole moment when all of a sudden the Play Nice acronym flooded into my mind. I had to slow down, grab some paper, and slowly write down the P, the L, the A, the Y. That's how to prevent meaningless, trivial, insignificant matters from blowing up on you and becoming a thing. And then I wrote down the words for the NICE, N-I-C-E, which is a 4-step model to resolve conflict. And so I've just kept that. At home, it's still the play is prevent conflict, but the letters stand for different techniques, different concepts, if you will, the NICE, how to resolve. And same with church, I carried that on. So the sandbox, I should have a wonderful answer for you, Rabbi. God gave it to me, and then he gave me the idea to make it an acronym, something easy to remember, with the play, 4 steps to prevent conflict, the NICE, 4 steps to resolve conflict.
I've said in many of the marriage counselings that I've done is that most men will work harder to win the heart of the one that they marry than it is to keep the heart of the one they marry. And that the things that they did before they got married, they no longer do now that they're married. And it's almost that, if you will, conquest. I've now won the victory, and I can go back to being provider, protector, and go back to the classical, almost Archie Bunker role of taking my place as the man of the house, and I don't have to do those things. Is that a trap that's been set and we've followed and continued and has become the source of a lot of hurt feelings, feeling of rejection that, I was worth pursuing, but I'm not worth keeping, kind of attitude that many marriages reflect in their challenges?
Absolutely so. And again, here's a news flash for your audience. Men and women are different. Now, I know in our society in recent times, or the last some decades, they've tried to convince us, no, that they're identical, they're just socialized differently. Hey, I don't buy that. Men and women are different. Women, from the time they're young girls, are dreaming about their wedding, their Prince Charming, the dress they're going to wear, and they're thinking, someday I'm going to be a wife and a mother. That's built into the very inner fiber of most women, by Almighty God. I believe that. Men are different. When they're little boys, they're thinking, what am I going to do to earn a living? How am I going to provide for my family? That's why so many men are almost too work focused. But it's built into the heart of man by Almighty God to provide for their family. Here's another thing I know about men. We hate to fail. We hate to fail. And many times, I'm not bragging when I say this, but a man would rather not try than risk failure, because then he can say, well, I didn't really fail. I never tried. One last thing, I'll turn it back to you. Where do we learn how to get married? Yes, there's some premarital coaching, but that's done before the wedding typically, when they're so gaga in love, they're not listening. Oh, you're talking about problems that are going to come up in a marriage? Well, that will never happen to us. We're so much in love. We're the perfect couple. Yeah, right. Every couple thinks that. that delusion, if you will. So when I do premarital preparation, not premarital counseling, premarital preparation, I want to meet a couple a few times before the wedding. I want to make sure they have a timeout signal in place. I want to make sure they know the love talk. I want to make sure they have a few basics. And yes, I want to prepare them that gaga love is going to wear off. It can't last more than 2 years, experts say. But then I ask them to commit that we're going to meet at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and a year after the wedding. Let them get some experience. Let them have a dust up or two and realize, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I didn't marry a perfect person. Maybe we don't have a perfect marriage. But you bet two, again, as I said earlier, fallible human beings who are self-centered at their fleshly core, which hopefully is overridden by the Spirit, but it has its moments of emergence. Couples need to know, but let me share this real quick, if I may, Rabbi. Gary Thomas, I've never met the man, but he wrote a book that has the greatest title I've ever heard, at least the subtitle. He wrote Sacred Marriage. And again, that's fine. But the subtitle, what if God gave us marriage not so much to make us happy as to make us holy? And what a concept that is. What if marriage and family is a perfect laboratory, an experimental place where you can live out and practice Christ-like selflessness and service? I can't think of a better place to exhibit those qualities, and yet sometimes we lose focus and we don't always get it done. What do you think?
I completely agree with you. We're talking with Ron Price, author of a new book called Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Home, How to Enjoy Peaceful Relationships with the Most Important People in Your Life. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we are going to answer the question that Ron poses that says the idea of forgiving and forgetting is unrealistic, and find out what is really realistic in marriage and dig deeper into this concept of how couples need to play nice in the sandbox to restore peace in the home. We'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Ron Price, author of the new book, Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Home, How to Enjoy Peaceful Relationships with the Most Important People in Your Life. Ron, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Rabbi Eric. It's great to be here.
Ron, you say the idea of forgiving and forgetting is unrealistic. What is realistic in marriage?
I will be happy to answer that. Let me go back and tell you first, though, that we all heard some things in our youth that were just not true. Just not true. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Right.
I think most of us have realized that's not true. Forgive and forget is a nice sounding concept, but Rabbi, we can't do it. God constructed our minds, our brains in such a way that we retain a memory of every event that has ever happened in our lives. And I challenge people on that. I said, go back and think back, who was your first or second grade teacher? And Rabbi, even though it's been decades for many of them, most people can, boom, instantly, within a nanosecond, come up with the picture in their mind and the name of their first or second grade teacher. Now, if they moved a lot when they were young, different reasons, maybe that's not true. But the point is, we can't forget, short of brain damage. So the challenge is forgive and move on. Forgive and move on. I tell a fun story about a church lady who had been grievously hurt by another church member. And she was discussing it with a friend, and she said, I've decided to forgive her. And the friend said, forgive her? How can you do that? Don't you remember what she did to you? And the lady said, no, I specifically remember forgetting that. Again, oxymoronic, if you will.
Right.
But what a concept. I'm choosing to not hold this against the other party. I'm not going to try to forget, because the enemy has ways of stirring those emotional memories and planting seeds. And if we're trying to forget, and then we recall, we'll think, oh, maybe I haven't truly forgiven. Forgive and move on is a much more doable, I think, much more practical approach.
So many couples believe that they can change things that they noticed they thought would change after marriage, or things that they see. They begin to work on a strategy to get the other person to change. Is that wasted energy?
Well, I don't know if it's wasted energy. You'll get a result from it. Probably not the result you're hoping for. I think I write in the book, I was watching the Today Show years ago, and they said in our next segment, an animal trainer is going to tell us how she used animal training techniques to change her husband. And I went, oh, this is going to be good. In fact, I was going to turn it off and get to work, but I said, no, I got to watch this. And so the lady came on, and she talked about techniques used in animal training. And what you do is you look for the good and you reward it promptly, dramatically, what have you. That's good behavior. Here's a reward. I want to see more of it. So she said, I started doing that with my husband. I started catching him doing good things, and I lavishly let him know, hey, I like that. I appreciate that. And you know what? He began to change, she said. He began to do more of those positive qualities, positive experiences, and so forth. He treated me better. She said he really changed. But then she looked into the camera and said, or was it I that really changed? And Eric, I started doing a dance. in my office. Don't change the other person. One of the Gandhis said, be the change you want to see in the world. How about be the change you want to see in the marriage? We don't like being changed by others. Pretty good chance your spouse isn't going to appreciate your efforts to change him or her.
The techniques that you use in the book, practical ways to look at marriage from our spouse's point of view, that's not always easy, but I think that it's a very critical point in understanding that I know this is what you think you heard, but this is what I meant. Mm-hmm. And finding out how people's syntax, how people's framework for conveying a message are very different based on your upbringing, based on your background. I spent many more years in Hebrew school and many more years in the synagogue, 44, before I came to faith at age 44, which is almost 25 years ago now. And we respond, Jewish people respond differently in situations than non-Jewish people. We are a little bit more bold, more maybe considered to be abrupt or brash, but certainly not our intention. It's what we were raised in by parents that either lived through a war or escaped and came to America, and we have this survival DNA that says that after 5,000 years of being persecuted, you're wired this way. Your DNA is this way, and we make great comics, but we also do it because we are having to laugh at ourselves because it's a tearful remembrance of 5,000 years of pretty rough, tough travel for a very small minority. 14 million people in the world are Jewish. So understanding terminology and what do you mean by that, and what does that mean to you? What do you hear when I say these words? Because that's not what I mean when I say those words. Finding the lexicon and not forcing the other person to change the way they speak, but the way we process and understand what they speak. That requires something that most couples aren't good at, and that is dialogue. Not one telling the other, talking at them, but actually talking with each other and exchanging insights and handing off that key ring that opens up doors of understanding, which is a powerful tool to bringing reconciliation to a marriage where someone who may appear to be always critical because they don't say anything nice almost takes the attitude well, if I'm not criticizing you, then it was good. It's like, do you love me? Well, I'm here, aren't I? I'm still in the marriage, aren't I? I've heard those answers, for the last 20-something years, and after going into ministry. So where do we get these ideas? One, that having a difficulty or dispute isn't a negative sign. It's a condition that our condition is in. And two, do a lot of people give up too easily? Do they give up too early?
I think my eye roll just answered that question for you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We come into this world, Eric, with basic needs. One of those needs is the need to be understood. And again, it starts at birth. We cry. That's our only means of communication. And we want people to understand, why are we crying? Are we cold? Are we hungry? Are we soiled? Do we just need to be comforted? Why are we crying? And then we mature a little bit. We get some verbal skills. Rabbi, have you been around a toddler who's trying to be understood and nobody's understanding them? Have you had that experience?
Sure, of course.
Is that typically a fun experience for them?
Not at all.
Not at all. Not at all. It's frustrating when people don't understand us, and that never goes away. And so, what happens in marriages, in particular, any relationship, but let's focus on marriage, is you have two people each trying to be understood at the same time. So they're both talking. Well, obviously, if both are talking, no one's listening, and if no one's listening, no one's understanding. Or we might talk in what I heard referred to as the shoot and reload method of communication. That's where we fire off what we want to say, and then we pause while the other babbles on about something, but we're not listening. We're reloading so that we can fire off again. Rabbi, can I assume you have seen that with couples you've worked with?
Many. Most people's process is that they're listening only for the purpose of preparing their response. They're not listening for the purpose of understanding. Right. And how do you, in your approach to playing nice in the sandbox, how do you get people to become active listeners without inserting themselves into the equation? So I have to first unplug from you because we're in conflict. The lamp is a perfect example. The lamp only gives light if it's plugged into a socket. Okay, mm-hmm. It can be plugged into the socket and turned off. It can be plugged into the socket and turned on. That's an action that takes place in turning off and turning on. But even if we unplug it, no matter what we try to do to control the off-on, we can't because the source of power has been pulled out. In your narratives and discussions with and advice in your book about how to engage with people, is it more of an on-off switch, or should we unplug from the source so that we can actually demagnetize or de-electrify and actually not be drawing on our source of energy and power, but really weigh into the moment and be active listeners?
I love that analogy. I'm going to have to give that some more thought when we're done here. What I try to do is change the perspective. Again, shoot and reload is all about persuading. I'm right, you're wrong. Listen to me. I have no need to listen to you because you're wrong and I'm right. So change the perception from persuasion to understanding that we have a situation, not you or me. We have a situation. We need to understand each other. Why don't you go first? But then again, we have to use the love talk. I got this from the late Gary Smalley, who did all sorts of work in marriage and relationships. It's LUV. Listen, understand, validate. Now, there's some rules to do the love talk effectively, appropriately. When you're the talker, you're going to talk for yourself. Don't say you. It's you have the floor. Will you have the stage? You can't use that as an attack ground to lob grenades at the other. Just say I feel, I prefer, I would like. But you don't go on and on. Rabbi, you got to pause every so often and let the listener paraphrase, validate, if you will, what they heard. Because you're so that I can say to my wife ABC and mistakenly believe that she heard and understood ABC the way I meant it. Not always the case. So I speak for myself. I don't go on and on. I pause. The listener, all they can do is paraphrase back. So what I'm hearing you say is what I understand you to say. It's called proactive listening. I know you're familiar with this concept as well. But the listener can't say, I agree or disagree. We don't care. The listener can't say, well, I feel, we don't care. When you're the speaker, you bet we're going to care. But for right now, let's just assign the roles of speaker, listener. So it's actually, you might want to think of it, Rabbi, as two separate monologues that combine to make a dialogue.
In relationships where there's constant escalation, obviously the marriage is in trouble. How do you rapid response? How do you diffuse in the first session? Can you think of an example of a couple that were just at it, that they came for counseling, but you could tell that there was a great deal of woundedness on both parts, and there was a great deal of aggression on both parts, and this was, you could see the relationship had escalated to the point where there was a constant state of conflict. How do you diffuse that quickly and get them to understand that they are on the same side, that they are not enemies, that this is not a battle, and in this corner is Joni weighing 112 pounds, in this corner is Tom weighing 250 pounds, and at the sound of the bell come out swinging. How do you diffuse that in the book? What tools do you give to do that at home?
You know, I haven't read the book in a while. I have to remember now. I'm kidding. Couple of different things. And again, change the focus. They come in attacking and defending. That's their modus operandi.
Right.
Let's change the focus. I got a friend, Mike Hattabaugh. He's got a ministry called Hero Marriage. He takes an object, any object. He puts it on the table and says, folks, that's the problem. And so I've used that quite a bit. We'll pick an object and say, all right, that's the problem. How about if we all attack the problem rather than attack each other? Oftentimes I would have them, hey, do you have a picture of your child or children? Can I see it? And I would take the picture of the child and I would stand it up against an object and say, all right, let's pretend that your child is in the room right now, or your children. They're listening to this conversation. Do you think we might talk differently? Well, the honest answer in some cases is no, but hopefully with most people it would be yes. And so again, I get them to realize they're not the enemy. Their problem is the enemy. Negotiate with, not against the other person. Never threaten divorce. Realize we are in this together. We have a situation, not you or me. What are we going to do? What avenues can we explore? What different ways can we interact with each other that we can learn from this problem, be stronger, and move on till the next storm comes our way? So again, change the focus. Change it from attack and defend to, hey, we have a situation. What do we need to do? And if I may, one other technique that I often use is teaching an appropriate timeout rule. An appropriate timeout rule. Because so often in families, one person is upset and the other just says time out, and they storm off. Bad move. Because you've left the other person wondering, well, where are they going? Coming back, are they rejecting me? Are they rejecting the relationship? They don't know. So the appropriate timeout is to say, you know what, I need a timeout, or I think we need a timeout. I'll be back in an hour, and we'll talk then, using the love talk. Or you know what, I can't do this right now. I'm too emotionally charged. If I engage with you right now, I'm liable to say or do something I don't want to say or do. Timeout, I'll be back at 2 o'clock, 5 o'clock, typically within 24 hours. So you're letting the person know, I'm rejecting the argument right now. I'm not rejecting you. I'm not rejecting our relationship. Change the focus back to a we're in this together.
Well, we've been talking with Ron Price, author of the new book, Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Home, How to Enjoy Peaceful Relationships with the Most Important People in Your Life. You all understand the term IQ, but what if I told you that you have an MIQ? That would be a marriage intelligence quotient. And if you were getting ready to study for the SAT or the ACT or for the LSAT, you would want a crash course in telling you how to raise your score and to increase your aptitude, and that's exactly what this book does. It raises your MIQ, your marital intelligence quotient, by giving you tools that are going to help you see problems and see solutions to problems and proactively employ techniques in your marriage for playtime, for conflict resolution time, for open dialogue and communication. recognizing that each one of you are created in the image of God and deserving of love, respect, and validation. But you just don't know how. You've gotten into a rut, and this will help you get out of the rut. So the book is called Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Home. Go to ignitingnation.com, and right there on the home page, you'll see the name Ron Price. Click on it. It'll say, love the interview, get the book. And click on that link, and it'll take you right to the link to get either the Kindle edition or the paperback edition of Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Home. Ron Price, thank you for sharing insights about conflict resolution, mediation, and marital relations, and teaching us how to play nice in our sandbox at home. Thank you.
Rabbi Eric, it's been a joy. Thank you for the privilege, and God bless your ministry. Thank you.
Thank you, and God bless you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.